Hello and welcome to video number 3 of the Greater Reality Healing Program. Hi, I'm Dr. Mark Pitstick. To learn more about my training, experience, and outreaches, please visit soulproof.com/about. Also, please watch videos number 1 and 2 for this program if you haven't already. Again, this is Greater Reality Healing. All this will make a lot more sense. As mentioned in video number 1, articles mentioned are free and they're available at soulproof.com/articles. Also, my 8 books and 10 audio programs are $15 or less, and I'll be mentioning some of these as resources. However, if you truly cannot afford them, email me at mark@soulproof.com. That's SOUL proof.com, Mark with a K. And we'll send free digital copies 2 at a time. All right, we're dealing with 17 keys to help you heal, transform, find the blessings to your whatever your losses, challenges. And so key number 2 is internalize the great news. We talked about the great news some in video number 1, and I listed the 10 items that Dr. Gary Schwartz and I identified about the nature of reality when we wrote our book, Greater Reality Living. So again, this great news is based on scientific, clinical, and or experiential evidence. And it's all wonderful news. That's why we call it the great news. So this is listed in article number 19, and also in this article, which is article number 82 at soulproof.com. So whichever way you see the printed list, I recommend printing the list and reading it daily. That will help you move beyond mere intellectual beliefs to deeply internalized knowing about how wonderfully life's set up. And when you really know this, you know this in your bones, your DNA, however you want to put it, that's what gets you through the day then. That's when you're free. You shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free, attributed to Jesus saying. So that's the kind of, and again, the great news has to do with things like no one really dies, you will see your loved ones again and can communicate with them now. You are one with source energy, you're an integral, beloved, eternal part of that you're here with special gifts to share. You create the quality of your life, whether you're on earth or elsewhere, by your predominant thoughts, words, and deeds. So 10 items like that, so make sure you read those. So regarding this internalization thing, because really this list is too good, seems too good to be true to some people, especially those with fear-based religious teachings, negative cultural and educational influences. So in the past you might have suffered needlessly because of archaic misinformation propagated by ultra-powerful political and church rulers. So this is one of the reasons I attended theology school. I remember sitting in church, Lutheran church, hearing things like, God's love knows no bounds, but then thou shalt fear the Lord thy God. And I'm like, what? That doesn't make sense. And talk about, Jesus left the 99 sheep to found the one that was lost, and does the same thing for people. And yet later on, Jesus is waving a sword in his mouth and casting the unrepentant into hell forever, Revelations. And I'm just like, what is up with this crap? So that's how I went to theology school, and I found that so many things have been changed by mistranslations, interpretations, outright mistakes, political expediency, etc. And so that's why I say, read whatever holy book. And Buddhism, for example, Buddhist scholars admit that they don't know what the Buddha really said and what didn't, what's been added on over time. by well-meaning and or power-based people. So that's why it's important to read any sacred information or any information about the nature of reality. First of all, read it, see what they have to say. Secondly, look for other evidence. I don't recommend just going by one book. And then thirdly, what does your inner knowing say about it? What does your inner heart feel about it? And that's when I think you will have the best view of what makes sense to you that you can base your time on Earth on. Original teachings based on first-hand experiences and enlightened understandings by the founders of these religions, I mentioned Jesus, Buddha, and others, may well have been accurate. However, again, history clearly shows that over time those have been changed by additions, deletions, transcription errors, mistranslations. So you can now comfortably focus on more contemporary and accurate understandings about the nature of reality, and then compare those, because both Dr. Schwartz and I respect, especially the what Aldous Huxley called the perennial philosophy, those golden threads of truth that run through all great religions. I mean, it's a real basic message. Love one another, love yourself, know that you're not alone in this universe. There are higher powers that are there to help you. Bodily death is not the end of life. You have important purposes for being here. You're a being of light. Let your light shine. Forgive others. I mean, you know the list. It's a short list, and it's pretty basic, but it's also pretty hard to embody that day in and day out, especially when you get challenged. So many people, understandably, given the job religion did for the most part, I say somewhere that I give, in general, religion a C, grade of a C for the job they did, teaching about death, afterlife, and this earthly experience. And fundamentalist religions, I give a F minus. Is that even a grade? So based on that, what most people received as supposedly good information, many people are confused. They're scared. They don't want to even think about an afterlife or God. And I don't blame them, considering the hack job that many of these religious denominations did about the Creator. So people have questions about life, death, and the afterlife. They may think, especially if they've been abused or suffered, that the good news, the great news, sounds too good to be true. So I answer many of these questions in the following resources. First of all, my Ask the Soul Doctor book. I answered 171 questions. They're the most common ones sent to me from people around the world. Next, I've written 122 articles at soulproof.com/articles. And you can scan the titles to find ones that address your biggest questions and toughest challenges. When a loved one passes on, when a loved one changes worlds by suicide, when you have been abused, are you the weird one in your family? You might be more evolved if I think I've answered everything. I've been doing this for over 50 years, so I know the questions by now. Also, my book, The 11 Questions, contains my answers and those of 11 experts to the existential questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What happens after I die? Is there really a loving, supportive creator or universe? If so, why is the world in the shape it's in? How can I best live while I'm on Earth? And so on. So these are a lot of resources for you. Now, this is really important to know. Old wounds from past abuse can block you from really knowing the great news and living accordingly. It's like you heard the saying, seeing with eyes unclouded by fear. And again, Jesus spoke about seeing with eyes that really see and hearing with ears that really hear. I don't mean to go too Christian, especially for people of other faiths, but that's the faith I was brought up in, and I attended Methodist Theological School. But again, I respect and have learned a lot from all the major religions. So it's important to see clearly, to open your third eye, to open your spiritual eye, to see more of the big picture of life, different ways to put this, so that you can understand that, yeah, life is set up beautifully. And the more we know that, then the more we're at peace. We feel peace, joy, no matter what's going on. I know many people have done it. So one way to release these wounds, anything that's caused wounds, abuse, prejudice, mistreatment, etc., it was with my holistic breathing technique audio program. This is described in article number 70, I think. Let me check. By the way, these videos are like I'm working with you one-on-one. Obviously, they're not perfect. Yes, holistic breathing, article number 70. So you can read about that, and you can get the technique at soulproof.com/shop. Only $15. But again, if you really need it and can't afford it, let us know. I've led thousands of people in group sessions with this technique, and I've seen amazingly rapid and profound healings. Of all those people, I've only had one person that had an adverse reaction, and that was a mom who was attending my workshop on the year anniversary of her little baby dying, and she just started pounding her head on the floor because she was in so much pain. Luckily, I was right there. I had my eye on her. I could tell she was struggling, and put my hand on her head right away. The point is that at least the first couple times you do this holistic breathing technique, have a trusted person with you, a coach, at least in the next room, so they can hear if you're struggling. But again, that's so rare, 1 out of thousands and thousands of people. So this technique helps you release deep layers of grief, needless fears, and past information. Also, my love, acceptance, and forgiveness technique, the acronym is LAF, L-A-F, helps you achieve just what the title says. And you can do this toward others and yourself no matter what's happened in the past. And we're talking about physical, emotional, mental, and or sexual abuse, mistreatment, cruelty. Now, this love, acceptance, forgiveness technique doesn't require you to condone their behavior, nor does it negate you seeking legal justice if that's appropriate. Further, you don't have to have a relationship with them now on earth if they're still here, or even in the next life if you want. However, you suffer the most when you hang on to the past and the accompanying lower energy emotions, anger primarily, regret, and so on, lack of forgiveness. So please start now to release the past. The LAF technique is described in article number 40. Again, all these are at soulproof.com. So read the article number 40, use the technique under shop. So powerful. It's also important, again, to love, accept, and forgive yourself, since people are often so critical of themselves and they get stuck in self-blame, shame, and guilt. And those are real lower energy emotions. And we'll get into this more later, but this isn't just like a feeling. This is how you are. This creates your reality, because ultimately, in the most absolute way of understanding, we are beings of energy. So is your energy fast, smooth, high, congruent, balanced, which would be peace, joy, love, gratitude, compassion, and so on? Or is your energy lower, slower, incongruous, chaotic? And that would be things like anger and hatred and regret and so on. So this is about changing actually the very vibration of your being, which affects your health, it affects your relationships. I don't know if you heard the saying, who you are speaks so loudly. I getting emotional. This is so important. Who you are and how you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying. So that's why it's so important to love, accept, and forgive yourself, so you're not literally your life's ruined by all these past events. Even if the other people were totally wrong, you let go of your end of the rope. It takes two to have a tug of war, so you let go of that. So one of my mottos is everybody is doing the best they can given their level of consciousness. So that's one that really helps. My fiance Andy and I say that almost every day. And kind of a fun version of that is, we're all just out there trying. So everyone is doing the best they can given their level of consciousness. So think about it. If someone's a beginner soul, this is their first time on earth, their first time away from home, they don't have a clue. They're just making this up. They're stumbling through. They're like a child who's trying to learn to walk but falls down 1,000 times. So if you can remember that and have compassion and realize about 85% of the people on the planet are considered beginner souls. This is based on the Life Between Lives work by Michael Newton, PhD, and his team of researchers and therapists. So that means only about 15% are more intermediate to advanced levels, and they're usually teachers and healers and helpers. So just keep that in mind, and that way you don't take it so personally. Also, life is so vast, and that's why I talk about seeing the big picture of life. The more you can see that, the more you can understand the mind of God, the more you can understand it's all good, it's all God. Really, life is set up exquisitely. For example, some more advanced souls will volunteer to be abused. Why? Because they know the great news. They know this time on earth is a blink of an eye. They know that they can't truly be hurt. It's a way for them to test to see how much they really know, how much they've learned the lessons. And it gives, the beginner souls a chance to learn firsthand that you shouldn't hurt someone else. It's like, how can you really appreciate love until you've hated? So again, this is really deep stuff, and if you've really been abused, that may just sound like crazy talk, that advanced souls will volunteer to be abused, but there's good evidence for it. Bottom line, no one benefits when you blame yourself for what you should have, could have, would have done in the past. Looking back has the benefit of 20/20 vision, but it's not always so clear, is it, when you're in the thick of things? There's a long list of things I would do differently. I'm 71 years old. I've done so much more than I ever thought I would. However, I still think, dang, if I would have known this when I was 11 years old, and you can do it a little bit to learn, to deepen the lessons. And by the way, if I could do it over again, that might be happening in another time, space slice of life. So we're talking about multi-location, parallel realities, simultaneous realities, which I discuss in article number 75. So it could well be that when you say, if I could do that over again, maybe part of your energy is doing that in another aspect of life. However, you don't want to spend too much time doing it. It's kind of a waste of energy. It dishonors your past, because really how you are right now is a result of all those things. And my fiance Andy, who's so remarkably wise, I really think she's part angel, says if you change one thing, you could change anything. Tony Robbins, a motivational speaker, I trained with him many years ago, and he put it this way. He said, all right, what are there, 8 billion people on the planet? Let's say there are 8 billion playing cards, and you could pick one. So instead of having your life, you could have a life of a random person among 8 billion. Would you be willing to pick one that you couldn't see and trade your life now? And most people go, no, I don't think so. So it's really important to honor, learn from, and be grateful for your past, despite sometimes missing the mark. And that was the original translation in the Aramaic language for the word sin. You know, when some people talk about sin, you missed the mark. It's like, well, does a child sin when they touch a hot stove? No, they don't know. You know, they haven't learned yet. Same way with beginner souls, or same way with people who have imbalanced brain and, you know, or mental illness and so on. So at times, all of us fall down and make mistakes. What's most important is to repent. And that word originally meant, it's very simple. Acknowledge your mistakes, apologize, say you're sorry, make amends as much as you can, and do better in the future. That's all you have to do. But again, it can be more easily said than done. So the LAUGH technique, love, acceptance, forgiveness, helps you do this and in the process more deeply internalize the great news, which is this key. So again, those who abused you may be beginner souls who are just learning their way around the block. And when I mentioned the clinical work of Dr. Michael Newton and others indicating that about 85% of people on the planet right now are beginner souls. When I read that statistic, I thought, well, that explains a lot of things about humans. Because really, when I was younger, I felt like a stranger in a strange land. I was like, what am I doing here? I had to learn how to fit in, and so many human ways seem strange. Well, over the years, I've learned that a lot of people with more intermediate to advanced levels of energy, consciousness, feel the same way. So, it's important to remember that 85%. So you want to hang out as much as possible with the 15%. Have a circle of influence, soulmates, people, what they call members of your tribe, to be with, and then you can venture out and help people in the 85% group. So when things get tough, challenging for you, just consider the perspective of people who deeply know the great news and can still live accordingly, even when there's problems going on around them or some challenging event in their life. They know it's well worthwhile to suffer a bit to help others awaken to their true nature and to grow themselves, to develop spiritual muscles. In other words, if you went into a gym and were pressing a pen, you wouldn't develop much muscle, would you? But if you have a 40-pound dumbbell, for example, you would more. Well, that's one reason people come to Earth. There's also another aspect to this about being abused, and this is discussed in article number 16 about contrast souls. So there's some good clinical evidence, and certainly experiential, that helps you understand the possibility that your abusers are actually soulmates, primary, secondary, or tertiary, fulfilling roles that you, and by you I mean your real self, your soul, asks them to do. Now you may think, why in the world would I do that? Again, short answer, adversity can strengthen your spiritual muscles, enable you to grow, learn, serve others at higher levels. So again, remember the big picture of life. While planning your upcoming earthly experience, you, again, your consciousness, soul, life force, knew about the big picture of life. It knew all these things I'm talking about. I mean, this is like grade school stuff when you're in the light. So as such, there was no concern about difficulties, loss, failure, or bodily death. When I trained with Dr. Brian Weiss to do past life regressions in 1998, he said that people, humans, want things to be easy, safe, smooth. He said souls care for none of that. Souls want to grow. They want to serve. They want to love. And so that's really what's important. So all this makes more sense when you remember all the great news we talked about. So the more clear and heightened your consciousness is, the more obvious the great news will be. And perhaps you knew everything on the great news when you were a child, but then other people told you it wasn't true. So let me share a story about contrast souls. This is so powerful. I was speaking to a group of maybe 400 parents at a Helping Parents Heal conference, and I was doing my afterlife contact technique, which is discussed in article number 9, and the afterlife contact technique we'll talk about later, but it's under SHOP. It's a way to facilitate better sensing your loved ones who have changed worlds, people and pets. Because as we discussed in earlier videos, your brain thinks it knows everything, but it turns out your brain and 5 senses can detect much, much less than 1% of reality. So that's why in these different audio programs, it's so helpful to quiet your brain so it's not judging and categorizing and so on. And then your consciousness comes to the fore and remembers and senses what's all around you, including your loved ones who supposedly have departed. So I did the technique with this group by our session, and afterwards people were sharing their experiences. And one mom said, my intention was to visit my daughter who was killed several years ago by a drunk driver. She said, to my surprise, I encountered the drunk driver. And I don't know if he had passed on, since that or not. I haven't kept up with him. But I saw him, and I looked into his eyes, and all I saw was love and sadness. And the mom said, in this deeply relaxed state in which her higher awareness came to the fore, she realized he was really a contrast soul. He was one of their soulmates who agreed to play the bad guy. Why? Because they knew that having that experience would wake up and shake up the mom. The daughter was a more advanced soul, so she didn't need to be on earth very long. But the mom had a tendency to slumber, to have spiritual amnesia lifetime after lifetime. So she said, okay, let's set up that possibility. This stuff isn't carved in stone, otherwise why bother? Well, let's set up the possibility that there'll be this horrible tragedy. It'll drive me to my knees, it'll break my heart, but it'll also open my heart and allow me to remember who I am, why I'm here, who walks beside me always. And boy, hearing that story really made me appreciate the possibility of contrast souls even more. So, that's a lot. I'm near the end, so let's wrap up this key. Everything I've been talking about in this video highlights why it's so important to find answers to your biggest questions, heal old wounds, and love and accept and forgive yourself and others. And part of this process is to better understand the greater reality, the big picture in which you live. And we'll be talking about this over and over, so you'll get it from this course. And another is to engage in greater reality living. That is, once you really know that you're an eternal being and all the great news, how do you choose to live, to treat yourself, others, and our planet? Again, when you remember more and more that you're an eternal and integral part of all that is. So here are some suggested action steps for this key. First, talk with trusted family members and friends and counselors to release blocks to internalizing the great news. Use the audio programs I mentioned, holistic breathing technique and the love, acceptance, and forgiveness technique, for the reasons mentioned, to get more clear about the big picture of life, to see more of the greater reality. Use other tips in this article. centering practices, for example, to let go of old, lower energy thoughts and beliefs, and thereby allow higher ones to come to the fore. And to learn more about internalizing the great news and topics I've talked about in this key, read articles number 19, The Great News, 40, Love, Acceptance, and Forgiveness Technique, 67, Contrast Souls, 70, Holistic Breathing Technique, and 98, Life Between Lives. So this is the end of video number 3 for the Greater Reality Healing Program. Join me for video number 4, and until then, let it shine.